Sourdough bread. This week we're making sourdough bread. Last week we talked about sourdough starter. This week I'm going to show you how I make bread out of my sourdough starter. It's a particularly good recipe for if you're like brand new to making sourdough, because you don't need to worry about different bakers' percentages of flour or different types of flour, mixing different types of flour and the ratios between them. It's just all-purpose flour, which most people keep in their house all the time anyway. I also wanted to share some of the mistakes that I have made so that hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and not make the same ones. First, let's talk about the equipment that you need. All right, so these are the tools, the things that I use when I make my sourdough starter, or when I make my sourdough bread. I use this huge bowl. I love this bowl for sourdough because it is nice and wide. This is not a recipe that you're going to be mixing with using a tool of any kind, like a spatula or a whisk or a wooden spoon. It's going to be sticky, so if that makes you anxious, use a wooden spoon or a rubber spatula. That's fine. I've found it to be easier for me to just get in there with my hands. That's what I use to mix up the dough and do the folds in. And I also use this curved bench scraper, which is great for scraping it out of the bowl and working with it on the counter afterwards as well. I also have a Banneton that I use for letting it proof. I bought this in the beginning of making sourdough bread, and I've discovered that it's actually not really necessary. So this is definitely something that you could probably skip. You could very easily replace this stretchy cloth with either a linen or cotton cloth napkin, and that would be fine. And this bowl can literally be any bowl. So I have it and I use it, but it's not necessary. You could replace it if you want to. And then when I bake the sourdough, I bake it in my combo cooker, Dutch oven, cast iron dealio here. You can bake it in a Dutch oven if that's what you have already. This has worked great for me. I also use it for tons of other cooking things. It very easily can go from the stovetop into the oven to like finish cooking. I love things that do multiple jobs. This has been wonderful. The last thing that I would recommend for sourdough and cooking, baking, whatever in general, instead of using traditional oven mitts that keep your fingers together and then, you know, like this, I got grilling gloves instead. Whenever I burn myself, it's always because I'm reaching into the oven and I get burned like up here, not my hands. My hands are always in like on the pot holder or inside of an oven mitt. These are nice and long and they cover my arm. I have never burned myself while wearing these. And it allows your fingers to be free and you can be a little bit more dexterous with what you're doing. And these, like the skeleton print on them is like rubber grippy material. So I'd recommend these, even though they're not like necessary. They're really useful. So first things first, for making the bread, put your scale underneath your bowl. Then set your bowl on top and remember to tear out the weight of your bowl, because you don't want the weight of the bowl, you want the weight of what's inside the bowl. I have accidentally forgotten to do this a couple times and then had to kind of figure out how to finagle my way through. Once you have your bowl and your scale ready, all you're going to do is combine all of the ingredients. 92 grams of sourdough starter, 9 grams of salt, 460 grams of all-purpose flour, and 340 grams of water. When I make this, I use warm water specifically because the warmer temperature will encourage more activity out of the yeast bacteria in your sourdough starter and make it rise better. If you've baked other kinds of bread before, you may notice that those recipes sometimes will say to let your dough proof in a warm area. Or even when you're using commercial yeast, sometimes the recipe will recommend letting your yeast proof in warm milk or warm water. That's because the yeast is more active in a warm environment. And now we're going to mix it up. It's going to be very sticky, so you can use a bench scraper like this if you want to have a tool of some kind in your hand to help you mix it up. Usually I ditch the bench scraper and just use my hands. And I put my hand in kind of a scoop or hold my fingers together and get underneath and scoop around the side of the dough. You can also do like a claw pinch like maneuver with your hand, where you just pinch it between your index finger and thumb to mix it up. But the main idea is to make sure that everything is well mixed, and especially the sourdough starter, because the starter will be kind of a clump already and like a dough of its own. So you have to make sure that that's well incorporated into the rest of the flour and water that you just added. Once you feel that everything is well mixed up, we're going to let it sit for 15 minutes. And then don't forget to feed your sourdough starter before you put it away. Now it's time for the folds, which is a lot easier if you have wet hands. So all you're going to do is get your hands underneath the main part of the dough and kind of jiggle it, and then let it fold back down on itself using its own weight. Rotate the bowl 90 degrees and then do it again. We're going to do this 4 times, so 4 folds in total at each step. Doing the folds does take some practice, so just be patient and you'll get it. What we're going to do is make 4 folds at 4 time increments, so that by the end you've folded it 16 times in total. So you're going to fold it 4 times at 15 minutes, 4 times at another 15 minutes, 4 times at 30 minutes, and then one last time at 30 minutes. The purpose of the folds is to strengthen the dough and develop more gluten. After the folds are all completed and your time is up, you're ready to shape the dough. I dump mine out on a lightly floured surface so that it doesn't immediately stick to my cutting board. You can see it's very, very sticky. So I'm just going to take it out and shape it into a ball on the cutting board, and then we're going to let it rest there on the cutting board at room temperature for another 20 minutes. Now it's time to set up the bread for the final proof. To get our little basket ready, or bowl, or whatever you're using, line it with a cloth of some kind, and then lightly flour it. The flour just helps it not stick to the cloth, but you don't want to put too much. And then we're going to do a few last folds before putting it into the bowl. So take the left side, fold it over to the right, take the right side, fold it over the left, take the top, fold it all the way down, and then take the bottom and fold it all the way up. It does take a few tries to practice this, but it does get easier every time you do it. And then you plop it seam side down into your basket, bowl, whatever you're using, and then cover it. And you can bake this bread on the same day, but I choose to let it proof in the fridge overnight to help develop the flavor. The next morning, the first thing to do is prep your oven. We're going to be baking this on the bottom rack, so I move the other rack out of the way up to the top. And then you want to preheat your Dutch oven or your skillet. Whatever you're going to bake in, you want to preheat at 450 degrees. While I'm waiting for the oven to heat up, I start preparing the bread. I take it out of the fridge and stretch a piece of parchment paper taut over the top and then flip it over to get the bread out. We're going to be baking the bread on the parchment paper in the pan to prevent it from sticking. The cloth can sometimes stick to the bread, but if you just jiggle it gently, it usually comes free. And then we're going to score the bread. I just use a knife, but you can use a lame if you have one. A very sharp tool is key, and you want to cut about 1/4 inch. You can make these as fancy or as simple as you like. I've seen everything from slashes to intricate floral designs. You can get as creative as you want with it. But once you're done scoring the bread, it's ready to be baked. With the pan being nice and hot from pre-warming in the oven, be careful not to burn yourself at this step. I usually take the pan all the way out of the oven, plop the sourdough in there, put the pan back in the oven, and then you want to cover it for the first 20 minutes of baking. At 20 minutes, we're just going to take the lid off and let it continue baking for another 30 minutes without the lid. Ta-da! Sourdough bread. I'm not going to cut into this one because I'm giving it to my mom. Aww. A things to note that I forgot to mention earlier is this little cloth that I put in my little bread basket. I made the mistake of washing it in the washing machine and then putting it in the dryer, and the other one that I have shrank and would not fit on the bowl anymore. So don't put it in the dryer. I got the recipe for this bread from theperfectloaf.com. The recipe is sectioned out into times of day instead of like time increments. Like at 7 a.m. do this, at 7:45 a.m. do this. I'm not always making bread on the same day or at the same time of day. All I did was I went through and I counted out like from 7 a.m. to 7:45 is 45 minutes. And then I put it in time increments. So I'll type that out in the description if that's helpful for you guys as well. Life is busy and we don't make bread at the same time every single day. But the directions on theperfectloaf.com are great, and it's also a great website for other recipes that use sourdough starter, like waffles, pancakes. There's a banana bread that I made earlier. You can check out that video. I'll put that in the description if you're looking for other things to make out of your starter. For storing your bread, when I first started making bread, I would just put it into a plastic Ziploc bag, but very quickly I realized that that kind of ruins the crust, because the crust on this is really, it has a really nice like crispy crust on the outside, but putting it in plastic ruins that. And it makes it really soft. If you're going to have it for like 1 or 2 days, you could even just leave it on the cutting board or like out on the counter. But if not, a bread box is great, or parchment paper, or like a paper bag. Just nothing that's gonna be like airtight. If you're just starting making sourdough or thinking about making sourdough, I would encourage you to just do it. I thought that it was very technical. I thought it was really hard, and I thought that I would probably mess it up. It's actually really easy. It's one of the easiest breads that I've made. Just do it. We use it for grilled cheese, like avocado toast with a fried egg on the top in the morning. Oh, so good. Like as a scoop for your like tomato soup. If you like this video or you learned something, give it a like. If you'd like to learn more, subscribe to my channel. I upload every Friday. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.